This video discusses scope, global variables, and function prototypes. What we're going to do is develop a program that converts miles to kilometers. We already have a little bit of code written on the right in which the user is prompted to enter a distance in kilometers. We store that value in a double, the variable named miles. And we have a fix me where we need to convert miles to kilometers, which is what we're going to develop the function to do. And then then the program outputs the distance in kilometers. So let's just take a look at where we are now with the program. So let's say it was 100 miles, and it's currently saying the distance in kilometers is 0. So let's first start by adding a function at the top, and this function is going to take in the miles and return kilometers. So our return type will be a double, which is to return the kilometers, and we'll name this function convert miles to kms. That'll work. And we're going to be passing in one parameter, which is the miles. Our return type is going to be kilometers. So we'll start those at 0, and we'll return kilometers. Let's compile what we have so far. And if we pass in 100 miles, all right. So we don't have anything broken, but we have started a foundation for what we'd like to do. All right, now let's use the function we just made. Let's name convert miles to kilometers, and we need to pass in miles, and then we need to store the return value into kilom. Now let's run the program, compiling first, of course. 100, and then it returns 0 still. Okay, that's fine so far. So we've run the program, stored kilom, but we still have this fix me, which I'm going to now move inside of the function to convert miles to kilometers. All right, there's a conversion value that is 1 mile is equal to, I'll put this up here, 1 mile is equal to 1.60934 kilometers. And what we're going to do is create a global variable that stores this conversion value of the kilometers, so that when we type in the number of miles, we can simply multiply the number of miles by 1.60934, and now we'll have the kilometers. So we're going to create a global variable, and this global variable will make a const so that it cannot be changed. And this will be miles to km, and that is equal to this value. So we just made a global variable that can't be changed. Now let's take a look. This global variable could be outputted. It can be accessed and used from inside this function. Compile and execute. We'll say 100 miles. There it outputs there. Additionally, we could output and access that conversion inside of the main function. So there's accessed in main. That's this output here. And then we have the access inside of convert miles to kms. Now that's different than the variables that we have declared within the functions. So for example, we created kilom here, and we output kilom here, and that's fine. But what about if I were to try to output kilom from within a different function outside of the main function? The main function is where kilom was declared. Let's take a look at what happens. We get an error message telling us that kilom was not declared in this scope. And that's on line 11. And that's right, kilom was not, but km was. And so we can actually, oops, I need to compile first. We can compile, no errors, run our program. If we enter a distance of 100, we get two outputs here, distance in km. That's this first output inside of our function convert miles to kms, and we have the second output, which is from main down here. Okay, so we know we can use that global constant miles to km, and we can get the miles times our constant and store that in kilometers in the variable km. So that was a conversion. Compile, execute. If we had 100 miles, and 100 miles is this number, 160, about 161 kilometers, which is consistent with the known ratio of miles to kilometers. So that's good. We fixed that so far. We have our function. The last part is we can move this function, the definition of the function, to below the main so that we can conserve the space usage above main. So what I'm going to do is copy that function and paste below the main. Let's compile and see what happens. So we get a complaint on line 29 that we have a redefinition of this function. That's true. This function is also defined up above. So what I'm going to do next is clear out the instructions inside of our function convert miles to kms that resides above the main. And then I'm going to even remove the curly braces and add a semicolon at the end. So all we have is now a declaration of a function. And this declaration contains the return type, the name of the function, and the parameters, which are consistent with our definition of the function, which now is below the main, where we return a double. The name is the same, convert miles to kms, and we have a single parameter, which is a double. Let's run this first by compiling, execute 100 miles, and we get the right output. Thank you.